Not only are we overwhelmed by our suffering, which is normal, but we're overwhelmed by any of the tools that we're given to cope with our suffering. It feels like too much. And what I would say to anyone listening who's ever felt that or who is feeling that is remember that it's only in the small steps that revolutions are born in the world in general. And I think in our body.
Hi, Tanmeet. Welcome to my podcast. It's a treat to be here with you and to get to have a conversation with you to share with everyone.
I'm thrilled to be here, Drew. Thank you.
Now, Tanmeet was just giggling because I'm just starting this, and so after figuring out Riverside and the tech issues, I also was sharing that I'm working on the format because I'm really used to a very specific format. I am a psychodynamic psychotherapist who believes in the arc of a 45-minute session. And so maybe that's what we'll try today and see how it goes. And I want to talk about mental health. And I also want to make sure that we talk about you and your book and where you are in your journey as a physician and as a healer and as a psychedelic medicine practitioner and as a researcher and all the things that are going on. That's a lot to fit into one session, so I think you're going to have to come back really soon because also Tanmeet, Dr. Sethi, and I have been working together now quite closely over the last few months, really bringing together our visions and our energy around integrative mental health. So welcome.
Thank you. I also thought I was going to get some free therapy there for a while, so we'll see if we can fit that in.
Well, that's that's where I'd like to start in a real way. I mean, that's what I love about being a psychiatrist. And just, where are you? You just launched this. I'm going to hold the book up. I had an early copy, and I feel so blessed to be on the back of this book, getting to see an early copy and then offer a blurb. And so your book is out. Yeah. So how are you? Like a month past publication?
Yeah, just a month.
How you doing?
Yeah, actually, this is a good place to start because it has a lot to do with mental health, how I'm doing. It always does. But I am doing great. It's busy, but it's healing medicine like I never knew it would be. And it's not just about writing a book and getting feedback and feeling good about, helping people and impacting their lives. It's about stepping into your truth and your story and about being vulnerable in the world. And I'm getting asked a lot about how are you able to be so vulnerable? What was your discussion with yourself around that? And I think that's such a good place to start because really what I'm trying to convey and also what I've realized through the process of this writing is that there's really no other choice for me. And I think for most of us, to really say, when am I going to step into my story? Because my story is part of my truth, and that's how I can step into the world in a different way.
I love this idea of stepping into it, that there's something about this vulnerability that almost is feeling more powerful to you. And we say that a lot. Also in men's mental health, we're always saying like, oh, you should be vulnerable, like share more feelings. And, and men are like, and we get really, men and women, people of all persuasions really get uncomfortable with vulnerability. And you're finding power in it, which I've always really found as a friend and a colleague interesting and I think more than interesting, something I've wanted to learn about from you.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, Drew, is that if we open up to what we're feeling and we're open about it in the world, we by definition, there is no other default other than to be more open to what is happening in the world to us. And so it's that way of opening to ourselves allows us to open to others and to feel them opening to us. And that's deep connection. And if we know one thing about all the blue zones and, the longest living populations, it's not just that they eat well and that they move their bodies, it's that they connect to each other. And we've lost that sense of community connection. And so I think there's something really big here about being open to your feelings has far greater ripples than we understand.
Well, I like also that notion that opening it kind of establishes a frequency almost between you and other people of authenticity, of openness about feelings. Not that we need to like share everything and kind of I think people imagine like, well, I need to like cry in public and be a mess, but no, like much more you need to be sort of present and real in a way and share with people where you are. You do so
Yeah,
much of
yeah.
that in this book. I mean, as I was looking through, thinking like, "Oh, what question am I going to ask?" I want to ask a couple here, but I was just really struck by, especially as a psychiatrist, right? Because I'm sort of, I would say, trained or conditioned that I want to focus on you, and we don't share a lot about ourselves, just kind of by the, I would say, nature of our work and history of kind of, I don't know how that, but you share a lot really openly, and I was wondering if you can talk a little bit around that and your process with that, especially when you felt uncomfortable. What are some of the practices that we can learn from you around
Yeah.
when we're because I think of the vulnerability kind of going down into something almost and just really saying, hey, this is it, and deep down in here. But it gets
Yeah.
really uncomfortable sometimes.
I didn't think about this before we got on together, but it just occurred to me with that question, and it's kind of bringing me full circle. So this is not in the book, but I think it really brings you and I full circle. Is that when you ask me about vulnerability, what I think about is how I really worked on this most before my TED Talk. And you were the one. When we first met in 2015, you were the one who told me you need to do a TED Talk. And I thought, okay. And I sort of spit out all these things that I talk a lot about, around the country and like things have expertise in integrative medicine. And you looked at me, and I don't know if you remember this. You said, no, that's not the talk. The talk is about your son and about gratitude and about the power. And I thought, oh, okay, who wants to hear about that? And also, how am I going to do that? And then I went on this sort of soul journey around that, around like, I cannot get on a stage, plaster it on YouTube, have my kids see me just talk about this painful thing. Not that we don't talk about it, but now I'm sort of publicizing their pain almost, so kind of feeling really uncomfortable about it. And I would say, when I think back to it, you were one of my most powerful instigators of asking me to be vulnerable. And in that process, what I really did was a practice, which is very resonant with practices in the book, which is saying, how can I get quiet and check in with myself around what's at the root of this vulnerability? What is at the root of my fear? And obviously, we, like you said, we talk about a lot, like, oh, we don't want to talk about all our feelings. But I really had to search, and I had to do a lot of breath work, a lot of emotion labeling, a lot of awareness work that I talk about in the book. And what I found was I was scared because in my family, we don't talk about bad things.
Mm, that's it.
But yeah, but doing that really helped me with this book. So I thank you.
Thank you so much, and everyone listening. And it's true, Dr. Sethi, Tanmeet and I have known each other for a number of years, and we met under very, I think, intense circumstances. In some ways, we've met each other at these intersections in our lives. We were working with the Center for Mind Body Medicine in Indianapolis at Eskenazi Hospital, what had been known at Wishart Hospital. And I'm a graduate of IU Medical School. So I'm with all these groovy mind body medicine, super diverse people led by Jim Gordon, who is a wonderful mentor to both of us and real leader in mind body medicine. But I remember thinking like this isn't going to work. I went to medical school here. This is Indiana. Jim's going to have us like dancing and shaking and, doing like perspective drawings, like hey, hospital CEO, here's some crayons, draw, your dream, what it looks like, draw what's in your way. And then it was such a powerful set of days. We also fed everyone and ate together and met with, I think it was about 200
Yeah.
folks, from everyone from the CEO to folks who drove ambulances. And this is the context of where we met. And I do remember that moment where I heard about your son from you. And then I heard about all of the medical stuff. And there was just something that really struck me about the difference in how I felt listening to you about those two
Mm.
different subjects. And then I remember it was a real honor. You were really nervous about a TED Talk and could you do one? It was really an honor to nominate you and then have you just give such a, if folks haven't uh, seen Tanmeet's talk, make sure we'll put it in the show notes for
Yeah.
one of our early
No.
recordings of the podcast. So that's what you say on the podcast, right? We're going to put it in the
Yeah,
show
yeah,
notes.
yeah, yeah.
But take a look because it demonstrates something about gratitude. And I want to pivot and talk about gratitude, which is this notion of a lot of people misunderstand gratitude. And I really did until I met you. You came into my life with this notion of having more gratitude, not just for, what I was often gratitude for. I'm gratitude for my health, gratitude for my I don't know, family and their health. And, like good thing, gratitude for the air and the nature, all these good things. And there's another more powerful piece of gratitude that you help me understand.
Mm. Yeah. And that is I talk about in the book a lot about your gratitude for your pain, which I was very resistant to. I was very resistant to how could a mother be thankful that her child is dying? I mean, that's dissonant, right? I mean, that doesn't feel right. And yet, as much as I fought against it and resisted, out of sheer desperation, I finally gave in to try this practice. And when I did, what I found is that saying thank you for my pain was far bigger than I understood. What it meant was it allowed me to turn towards my life instead of away from it.
Mm.
It allowed me to reclaim power in my body that this suffering and loss had stripped away. And if there's one thing you and I can, I'm sure we'll agree on, is that we see patients in very serious spiritual, struggle and a loss of connection, of meaning, of hope, of joy. And in all those ways, we lose our power. We feel powerless. We feel hopeless. And gratitude is a way to reclaim power. It's not a wishy-washy, contrived platitude. It's a way to say, here is my life, and I turn towards you.
Yeah, you've been so open with your personal life and your struggles and something that I'm working on a little bit, but uh, I've found that really hard sometimes in the depth of, let's say, a depression, or with patients
Yeah.
when they're in the depths of addiction, and the notion of having gratitude for their suffering or for their pain, or for me when I'm there, my worst, like, I'm doing a great job sleeping through the night now, but like the 3 a.m., it's like the chemistry is wrong up there, Tommy. It's like not
Yes.
right. Like the where my breath. Sometimes I'll sit and watch. I'm like, are you serious? Like,
Yeah.
this is where you're going of all the things, and really have worked using some of your techniques. And I want to talk about some of the techniques so everyone listening has some tangibles. But really, for me, kind of really had to force myself to move my mind to someplace else. In some ways, it's almost impossible to think about having gratitude during some of these painful moments.
Yes, I agree. And so I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think what we do as humans is not only are we overwhelmed by our suffering, which is normal, but we're overwhelmed by any of the tools that we're given to cope with our suffering. It feels like too much. And what I would say to anyone listening who's ever felt that or who is feeling that is, remember that it's only in the small steps that revolutions are born in the world in general. And I think in our body, and I actually tell a story in my book of a patient who was suicidal, desperate, hopeless, powerless, who told me herself that when I can say, I'm not grateful for my whole life. I'm not even grateful for this struggle, but I can find gratitude that I made it to this next moment, and then the next moment. And slowly I find moments are worth fighting for. And it's not that we all have to believe that. It's an invitation. I invite people to come in on this journey to say, what is it that I could do to not shift my thoughts? Because I don't believe we can just shift our thoughts. I think we shift the way our body and our nervous system translates our life so that we can think differently. I think it's a mind body connection and a whole experience. And I often tell, I myself, Drew, have been quite clinically depressed, not just using the word lightly, clinically depressed. I even talk about postpartum depression in my book that I actually have not talked about publicly ever. Only a few people in my life know, because I had so much shame, Drew, so much shame that I could not want to have this life. And in a time where I'm supposed to be so joyous. And I can tell you that it is hard work, but it is no harder to practice these small steps than it is to live this big struggle.
Yeah, I think that is a wonderful way to put it, and thank you for sharing. I think it's such a difficult thing as a physician, as a BIPOC woman, as a mother, right? So, as you said, joyous time, as a wife, as all these roles that you have, to be feeling depressed, awful, suicidal, like not being part of this world. Um, I love that notion that it does start with small steps, because I think, and that there is a path forward and staying committed to that. I think it's an important message that people often hear, but they don't think about individuals like yourself as having strength through the struggle.
Yeah. And they're only seeing and hearing me at the end of that struggle. Not that I don't struggle daily now, but at those kind of struggles with desperate depression. And so, yes, you're seeing me and thinking, there's no way I could do that. But I thought the same thing until I slowly did it.
It feels that as we get older, as you and I have gotten a little more experience in our lives, there are more of those experiences for us to look towards. And I wonder, we always kind of can look back, but I'm wondering for you, if there are things as you're thinking about yourself, maybe with early experiences with depression, when you're more in your teens and 20s, what you might hope to know. I also feel like kids these days, as they call themselves kids, right, in their teens and 20s, they're so much more tuned to mental health and thinking about mental health. And I'm just wondering, what are some of those lessons for you that you go back to and remind yourself about the strength that you have?
Yeah. I think one is that I really feel grateful that I leaned on community, that connection, that I think when I was desperately depressed, I really felt alone. I felt isolated. I felt like no one understood. And it took me a while to understand. If I could go back and tell my younger self anything, I would say, you're not alone. There are others around you. Seek them out. Whether it's in a support group, whether it's through your therapist and your medical team. But beyond that, who are the people? I actually think it's a lot easier to reach out now. In some ways, we talk about how we're more disconnected with our social media landscape, et cetera. I think there's some of that is true. And then I also think there are ways that we're more connected, that we can find resonance. So I find that, I myself, my teens have definitely struggled with mental health, especially through this pandemic, but even before. And I find that this feeling they have that no one understands is so resonant for me, that I felt that so often. And I still feel on a dark day about my son that no one understands. And one of the practices actually that I talk about in the book is about calling on the wider circle. I call it widen your circle of ancestors, of people in your community who have suffered like you. And I lead people through a practice where they sit and imagine them in a circle around them, giving them love, compassion, and understanding, and breathing them out back gratitude. I do this, Drew, very often with mothers. I think of all the mothers in this life, these ancestors who have suffered, who have watched their children die, who have lost their children, maybe even blame themselves. And I think about them sitting in a circle around me and knowing what I am going through. And in those moments, it can sound woo-woo to people, but when I open my eyes from those, I swear to you, I do not feel as alone as I do before. And so I'm not going to wait for a randomized control trial. I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah, well, I think you're also speaking about the personal, internal things that medicine can't give us, that therapy can encourage us
Yes.
to have, to hold on to bolster. And this really speaks to me because I've had more of that recently, more of that feeling. Ta-Nehisi Coates was here in Jackson. He talked about, and he had this wonderful way. I wish I'd written on the phrase, but talking about ancestry and progeny and his kind of motivations and influences by both. And that word progeny and ancestry just kind of like, I don't know, the way he wove them together stuck with me. And I
Mhm.
felt more of that, more of the support of those generations before me and the wonder. And as you're saying, when and the familiarity of the suffering, it's not like my depression, even though maybe it includes some social media, or I don't know, that like the Whole Foods doesn't have this or that, or I shouldn't joke around, but the things that uh, are different, but there's something that is very human about the suffering that we all have struggled with in a variety of ways.
Yes, yes. And we can find strength in that. I think that this notion that when you ask me about my strength, the first thing I think about is the strength of those who have gone before me. That my strength is never my strength. My strength is by the grace of those who came before me.
Is that a good first
And
step? I'm sorry to interrupt, Tommy, but is that a
yeah,
good first step of as we're isolated and depressed, and we're maybe struggling to do, take that first step outside and connect with the community, to first kind of look inward and think about those, and maybe if it's relatives that you have a lot of conflict with, go to another generation, right? Go
yes,
to people who maybe you have only heard something over. Sometimes I think, the ones that you don't even know their names, like the great, 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 like what was their story? Is that a good first step in terms of really
yes.
trying to get a sense of those roots?
I love that. I think that's a beautiful first step. And what I say often to others and in my book is not only do that step, but realize you're right. A lot of us have, I don't actually go to my immediate ancestors, but I not only go to my farther away ancestors, I draw upon global lineages. Why stop at your relatives? We are all connected, right? Our communities can feel more
Oh,
broad than we
so
can conceive of.
widening the circle, both ancestral but also humanistic.
Yes.
Yeah.
And isn't it actually, I just thought, I can't remember the exact quote, but Mother Teresa said it, that the problem is we draw our circle of family too small, something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that that's true.
Yeah. I know. I, I think that is a really, it's the influence of your book. I was just, because it's both of these things, ancestry, but also how to widen that circle, have both been on my mind a lot, of both people in my lives. I've been thinking a lot about mentors. I just was at the American Psychiatric Association. And so I saw folks who, I first met them when I was a resident. And now they're and it's wonderful to see them and give them a hug and say hi and think, yeah, that they are definitely within that circle. So one way when we feel isolated, and everyone listening, I don't know, maybe I'm supposed to be checking in more. I'm new to this podcasting thing, but I think one of the really wonderful things about this is getting into the nitty gritty of the specifics, right? Those little steps of spending time, and maybe in some of these times that we've talked about having a hard time having gratitude for, like late at night, or when we wake up,
Yeah.
or when we're in pain, or when we're suffering, to think about where and who we're from, and then this tip from Joy's My Justice Tanmeet's book, that the widening of the circle and the way you think about family and community. And I think that's a
Yes.
really I noticed that in parenting it happens. So many of our friends, are people who were in some sort of prenatal class with us, and then those first few years of life where you're just you're kind of connected in some way, where they're like family, right? You've been through this powerful experience together.
Yes.
I want to hear a little bit about your experiences and your work around social justice, which is maybe a little bit of a pivot, but specifically having being a white man, having come through sort of both Black Lives Matters and Me Too, I wouldn't having come through, but having had those happen, especially kind of during COVID and during a time when I was, having lived in a very urban, diverse place in New York City, living in a very rural, very traditional, conservative, very white part of American rural Indiana. I want to talk a little bit about social justice and some of what you've learned in terms of how people can get active in everyday lives. Because I think one of the things both of you, both of us as clinicians and on that kind of primary care, is thinking about, okay, what is that little step? What is your favorite vegetable? What is an action I can take this Wednesday in my busy
Mhm.
life?
Mhm. And so what's a little step we can take for social justice?
Yeah, I guess first
Yeah.
I wanted you to share a little bit about your work in that area because I don't think people are as familiar with it.
Yeah. So most of my work has been around of intimate partner violence. So both back in medical school as well as in Seattle for the last 26 years, founding organizations for South Asian women in particular and AAPI women who are experiencing intimate partner violence. And then a lot of social justice work in my medical career, really focusing on marginalized communities and decolonizing medical education. So, really looking at racism and bias we carry not only in our clinical care, but how we're handed down and carrying on bias in our research and our education. And what I would say is that my work around social justice is persistent and consistent in my career and my life, but yet it has transformed radically in the last 5 to 7 years because of work like my book. Which what I mean is that I used to think that to do my work, I had to suffer and only be in my anger and my fight. And if I'm not suffering and angry, then I'm not with the people, and we're not going to get anywhere. And and I think anger is really important, and I'm so grateful I have it because it galvanizes me and it inspires me. But what I didn't understand is that the more I worked on my personal inner liberation, my own joy and ease and expansiveness in my body, the more power I would feel. And then the more powerful I would be in my social justice work. So even one small step I would say for people is thinking about, what if we want more justice and power in the world? What are ways that you can feel more powerful today? What is a way you could feel more powerful so that you could do better work in the world with others? Is that more power in your body by moving it more? Is it through gratitude? Is it through, therapy? What is it? Where are you feeling powerless? Because if you can tap into your personal power, you will find more energy and sustainability in moving into work in the community.
Can you share a little bit about sort of early times in your career where there are kind of moments for you of having some realizations around this, or really feeling this kind of shift you're talking about from an externalization, as you point out, angry being a very appropriate externalization to a lot of the challenges and biases and structures that exist right now. But a moment for you of seeing that shift from kind of a more external anger to, it feels to me like almost kind of bringing it in and really getting into a very powerful stance with what you're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, when I reflect back, what I really think about is in medical school, I had two particular mentors of color who really galvanized things for me. One was an African American family physician, and one was a partner of his, a Latina woman, female family medicine physician. And both of them really taught me. I think of them often, actually. I'm not in touch with them, but I think of them often. And especially Dr. Flores, Esperanza Flores, who um, she was tough. She was gritty and tough. And I thought she hated me. And I worked so hard on that rotation. I just wanted to impress her, and she was so tough. And I just felt like I never really got any praise or validation from her. And it wasn't until the end of my time with her that she gave me her evaluation, and it was quite good, but she was quite tough. And I said to her, "Wow, I thought you hated me." And she looked at me and she said, "Tanmeet, why would you say that?" And I said, "Because it just, I never felt like you were proud of me or had any praise for me or anything. And she said, if you felt that, then you're feeling too much hate from yourself, because all I've done is hold up a mirror of the toughness that we need to get through this field together as women of color. But you have done all the work you need to do, and you're looking to me for validation, but you're not looking to yourself. And she said, look, you're never going to get anywhere if you don't figure that out. And it was this moment of realizing that even from my mentors of color, I was looking for them to give me what I needed, not just my white mentors. And she just kind of, inner toughness, always consistently branding tough. She looked at me and just said, you got to figure this out. You're not going to do anything until you figure it out.
Well, I think also it's such a meaningful advice, right? And maybe a confusing moment of two women of color within this medical system, and her really saying early on, validation must come from within, or the system will devour you. It's filled with
Yes.
bias against you in a lot of different ways, and I think that uh, isn't the message maybe we're hoping for in medicine today for the medical students and residents, but I think it certainly still, still exists in all circles of hospitals and medical systems.
Yeah. And I mean, I think now it's also helped me connect, again, community, coming back to that theme of community. It helps me when there's other BIPOC clinicians and physicians around me. I really go out of my way to connect with them and form alliances and community so that I don't feel alone, so that I feel like we have each other in this system. And I think that's just a metaphor and a microcosm of the wider systems of this life, that we always are looking for community. My community is not always BIPOC. There are white people in there too, Drew. And, and the question is, who can I connect to so that I can feel more power? Because I look to myself for my power, but we are more powerful together. And, this idea of, when my children are struggling, I always ask them, who is it that you think you can turn to in a time like this? And not necessarily me. I don't think, and I know that I, as their mother, are not their first good turn to. They need someone who they think gets it better, right?
Mm.
And so really allowing them to understand that I'm here for them, but I know that they need more than me.
Well, I think that's such a good step as a parent that I think so many of us, nod our heads and agree with, but struggle to enact, struggle to, like, who do you think you can help with this? Because as parents, we feel that pressure to be somewhat omnipotent or to continue, from those early years where we carry, we feed, everything, right? To transition, not to miss that transition into a period where it does take a lot of different individuals and people who maybe get aspects of our kids' lives better than we do.
Yeah.
It's a moment I worry about. I wouldn't say I feel guilty, but I feel like sometimes I'm getting to sit, with the young guy in his dorm room or off college house, like post party, hearing like all the details, hearing about the girlfriend, hearing about the friend, hearing about the class. And I'm comparing that to my own experience of then sitting down at the table with my uncles, being like, how was school? Like, good. And
Yeah.
I was thinking, like, could there be some exchange somehow? Because I know this is the stuff that mom would want to hear, and it's good. It's good, mom, if you're listening. So, but that idea again, that's so helpful for us, and to think about who else can help our kids. I see that in sports. I was very athletic, and so I don't feel very good at teaching my kids sports. Like, I'm really disappointed with myself as a parent. Like, I love playing with them, but it's how I just, like, if I listen to a video, I'm like, who's that ass? I was like, oh, that's you. Okay, the left, the grip, that turn. It's like it's horror, and I didn't think it'd be like that. I mean, it really didn't. But when I see other people get, like, the other coaches and my kids are looking and they're learning, and I'm like, thank you.
Yeah.
Like, you're a real coach.
Exactly.
You know how to teach these kids, not just be some pushy parent. So it takes other people.
In this life, when we're feeling powerless and hopeless, what is it that we can do to step back into that? What's that little small step we can take? And, we've really touched on some of that. Is it reaching out to others for support, whether that's in the medical team or outside? reaching into our inner resources. Can we just work on gratitude in the smallest of ways? That's the other thing. I don't tell people to be thankful for their worst struggle first. You got to build up that muscle, and start in the smallest of ways, because the small ways are what lead up to the big ways. And how can you really widen that circle of community, because power comes in belief and faith that we are not only strong in ourselves, we can have faith in that, but we are strong because of those who walked before us. And I think that power of that kind of gratitude, to have that in a daily way, is far more revolutionary than I had ever understood it to be.
Well, thank you so much for that. And it's something that we all have, and oftentimes that we don't think about. We end up so self-involved, and that gets pathologized in all kinds of ways, and we get so involved or lost in in the news, in our scroll, and in some ways avoid that. I had a patient say something very poignant this week. He says, she's been a little hard to track down, and I'm a little tenacious. Like, when I'm responsible helping you for your mental health, I want to, and you can fire me. But until then, it's like, back in, said something about, about not wanting to come in because it forced her to confront denial. And it really stuck with me, just that how so often with things we procrastinate, we want to live in a kind of compromise or set of denials. And I guess in some ways, sometimes we have to, right, to go on. But I wanted to hear just a little bit around this thing again that we can say and think about, but I find very hard to do this. How to take steps in towards having gratitude for the really powerfully hard things in our life. That part I'm still having. Like, I have aging parents, and I don't, and I bet you do too. And I can maybe say some things like, okay, it's I'm having some gratitude for that because it's helping put my adult life, midlife, middle-aged life in perspective. You see, as you study folks in their 70s and 80s and are with them and listen carefully, you learn a lot, and kind of it draws your attention to, I wouldn't just say your own mortality, but your own health span, as we're saying these days, and to your own say, like, trauma enactment. I've been really aware about, like, how much I like to work because it's very comfortable, being with in that setting and in my role as a psychiatrist. And thinking, well, what would happen if that wasn't how you were dealing with a pain or identity, right?
Yeah.
And just sitting with that idea. So anyway, this is a very long one. If I'm going to do a podcast,
Yeah. And do
question.
you mean that, I think there's some real potency here, though. Do you mean that it can be hard for you to feel grateful for your aging parent, that they're aging?
Yeah, I think it, it's hard. And I think about the next years with that, and kind of that bracing, and kind of knowing, and I think maybe you have particular experience with that, both with parents, but also having a child who's ill, of being in that spot. And so I think that's my question around gratitude, of, like, when I think about that, it feels like eating a whale sometimes. And honestly, I just feel like I'm kind of, I won't say faking it, but, like, I get a little suspicious when I feel okay about it, that I'm just kind of numbing out and dissociating a little bit.
Yeah, no, I hear you. So, one thing would be to just say, I don't know if you do this, Drew, but there are two things that come to mind for me. One is to have even a simple, like I said, build your muscle gratitude practice, where you're actually in a daily way practicing gratitude for small things, just 1 to 3 things a day, and having a way. I find much more accountability if you're sharing that with someone. So I have patients either find a partner to do it with, or even if they don't live by them, they text it to each other every day or email it every day. We in my house do it at dinner. So we have gratefuls at dinner, and we have an up and a down and a grateful. And you can have, you may not, sometimes one of us won't have a down of the day sometimes, but you can't ever not have a grateful. It's like a requirement.
Okay.
And so no matter how down your day was. So really finding this way of that actually was so good for me with my kids, because literally when on a really hard day, when I'm just stuck in we got to get dinner together and we're just eating and I like can't believe how hard this day was, I will tell you every time they will stop and go, so should we do ups and downs and gratefuls? And I'm thinking, "Oh, I almost forgot that because I'm so stuck in how hard today is." And so they've been my reminders. So getting partners in it is actually a really useful thing. Now, there are days where I remind them and they're like rolling their eyes at me,
I
but
think it's really important for folks to hear that come from you. I think people maybe imagine your house as like, everyone sits down.
oh, like a Zen
Yeah,
garden?
the mantra, and then it's like, "Are we ready for?" And then I'll say together like ups, downs, and
Yeah,
grateful.
yeah. No,
And
no,
so I think
no.
it's really nice for everyone to hear that and be reminded that there are days that they roll their eyes and there are days that they lead, and
Exactly.
that's what partnership is about, because we're sort of the same. Uh,
Yes, yes. So finding a partner is really powerful, I think. It really enhances, just like any habit formation. We talk to patients about that all the time. It's part of the neuroscience of habits. If you can really get community in habit forming, you can do better. And then the second thing is that, so I think that one, build the muscle and start there, and make it easy for the butterfly, the cup of coffee, the whatever, because people think it's too simple, but it's when it gets so simple that the magic starts to happen. And then the
Meaning it's so
second,
simple to understand that work the gratitude muscle of, don't start with, I want to have, gratitude for my bankruptcy in
yeah,
1995, or my, no. Like, start with having gratitude, and finding those things that spark a little bit of a good feeling in you, or that you like, or, which I think is hard when people are down or anxious, right? To like
yes,
transcend that just for a moment, which I think is where
yes.
some of those recurrent tips we all have in the wellness world. Get out into
And I'll tell
nature.
you, Drew, I had a really hard, we're just past the holiday weekend, no matter when this comes out. And I had a really hard holiday weekend, a
Oh,
lot of caregiver exhaustion. I really was feeling a lot of grief and loss and fatigue around my care for my disabled child. And it was such a hard weekend for me. And there was a moment where my gratitude one day, I hardly left the house because of the caregiving. And there was a moment on one of the days where in my neighborhood, a large dog was on a walk with a huge teddy bear, stuffed teddy bear in his mouth. And he's just walking along with his teddy bear. And see, you're laughing. It gave me spontaneous joy. Honestly, it just made me laugh. And even telling you makes me kind of chuckle. And and so what I want people to hear is it's not that this dog and his teddy bear solve my caregiver fatigue. It's not that this dog and this teddy bear made everything okay. But what I will tell you is that in that moment I thought, "Oh, that's my day, that's my grateful today." And secondly, what I thought was, "Oh, I'm in here. I'm here." Like I feel that spark. I feel it. Now, what I really think people, I'm hoping they hear is that sticking to that kind of daily practice reminds us of the faith we have in ourselves, and also reminds us of the hope that always courses in our body. And so really understanding that it's just powerful. So it's not so trite that it solves everything, but it is everything.
mm.
And then the second thing I would say, other than the daily practice, because you will make the daily practice happen if you commit, then it becomes such a habit you can't stop it. The second thing is to remember that some days my grateful is that I can feel this hard, that it's this hard. And I'm not saying I'm grateful for the hard. What I'm saying is I must still be in here. If I can feel so much sadness, then my humanity has not been stripped away. And so you may not feel that. Someone listening may not be able to resonate with that yet, but I'm going to plant that seed for everyone, is that some days it's just that we're here feeling it, because it's human to not have a good day. Now, when too many good days string along and we have we need to get help. I'm not saying that just sit in it. What I'm saying is that we can also acknowledge that the humanity of connection is in our pain as well. So start slow, start easy, start with someone, and then move up as you get, further into it, as you build up that muscle.
Thank you so much. This has been an outstanding 45 minutes with Dr. Tanmeet Sethi, a good
Oh,
friend of mine, a sister in efforts around integrative mental health, around more joy and justice and love and self-love. She's a wonderful clinician in our group, and she has a wonderful book out, Joy is My Justice. This is the first of
I'll
more
hold it.
conversations. Let's hold it up together. And everyone, thank you so much for listening. Please leave your comments below. Check out the show notes on my site, drewramseymd.com. And we'll be back soon with more talks around mental health, around what we can all do to take better care of ourselves, to widen our circles, expand our community. And my request, and I don't have many requests, is really that you think about some of these powerful lessons and really try and take some steps, as Tanmeet has shared with us, take some small steps to enhance, to do some reps, to build that muscle around your ability to care for yourself and to expand your heart and your gratitude. Until next time, thank you, everyone. We'll talk soon.